This is Kathleen at My Alabama Farm Life, and today we're going to talk about the trees that are in my yard. Well, Alabama Power was out here this week and they were cutting back our trees. I'm not exactly impressed with everything that they did, but I have to admit I see the logic. I would prefer that some of these trees had been cut back more, but I also understand that if the trees are lopsided, there's a good possibility that they might fall down, and we don't want that. The really odd thing, though, is not 2 days after they left or went around the corner to cut, we had a tree fall in our yard, and it wasn't a small tree. It was funny because I was inside on my computer. It was about 3 o'clock and I heard this noise. And I got up and I looked around and I thought that maybe the cats had knocked something over in the basement. I looked downstairs. The cat was still laying by the foot of the stairs, so I figured nothing happened. When my son came home, I told him I heard a noise and he couldn't find anything. It wasn't until my daughter-in-law came home and she told us that a tree had fallen in the yard. When I first walked out here, my impression was that it was a small tree, but I couldn't figure out what tree it was. And then I started to move back and I realized that this was a fairly large oak tree that had fallen down. It's hard to see because of all the wisteria, but as you move back, you can see where it also brought down a smaller tree. This was a good size oak tree that fell, and it was probably about the same size as the ones that you see there, maybe a little bit smaller. Thankfully, it fell in such a way that it missed everything. Well, except for my raised bed. I had just moved a raised bed from the backyard into the front yard, and I was looking for a place to put it. Oh, I see a chicken. I wonder if she's laying eggs over there. Yeah. So my son cut up the tree enough to where we could get the raised bed out from under it. Well, it's not too bad. I think I can hammer that out. It shouldn't be too hard to fix. And even if I can't, it's okay. It'll still hold dirt and I should be able to still grow things out of it. Well, the tree was larger than my son anticipated, but he and my grandson got out here and they got a lot of work done. He's got the tree mostly cut up, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. But the driveway is cleaned up and that's awesome. Now, while my son was working on his project, I got out and started working on mine. Since the guys have gotten over here and cut back on the oaks, it has really brightened up the area. Now, I've got a bunch of crepe myrtles over here. There's also a ton of branches that are down. So I'm going to get that all picked up. I'm going to cut back some bushes, weed eat, and start getting this area cleaned up. But in the meantime, I want to tell you guys the story about the mules that were in my yard the other day. Well, it was Sunday morning. I didn't have big plans, just some yard work, taking care of the animals. But I had just made my cup of coffee for the morning. I sat down at my computer. I was going to play around for a little bit, drink my coffee. I was already dressed. I was ready to go when the dog started barking. So this was probably about 8:30. I get up, I look out the window, and I see a horse standing in the road. So I slide my shoes on real quick, put my coffee down, grab the dog's leash, and walk outside. Well, I fast walked. I don't really run too much anymore. But I get out there and I shoo what I thought were horses up into my mother-in-law's yard. She's got a big field in front of her house, so I kind of pushed them that way. And thankfully there wasn't a lot of traffic. As I was crossing the street, I flagged a truck down, and they slowed down, went by, and then I got what ended up being mules up into the yard. Well, the dog was still barking because I didn't shut the front door. And so he was barking at me and the mules. And then my grandson came out to see what was going on, and he got to see the mules. And then a little while later, my son came out because the dog's still barking and they wanted to know what he was barking at. So my son came out, and well, basically everybody's awake now and up on Sunday morning. So I get these mules up away from the road, closer up to the house. And me and my son hop into his car, and we're going to go run down to the man's house that we think that these animals belong to. Initially, my thought was they were donkeys, because on the property next to us, they have donkeys. So we're thinking donkeys. I didn't realize they were mules until later on. But we run up to his house and let him know that his donkeys are loose. We come back. I keep the donkey. The donkeys have been pretty good. They've stayed in the yard. They haven't come up to the street yet. And then they started walking back towards one of our back fields. So I followed them, and they got to the first backfield, and they just stood out there and grazed. And then my grandson brought me some carrots. So I coaxed him to me with some carrots and led them back down to the front of the house. And about that time, the owner does show up. The only problem is the first thing out of his mouth is, those aren't mine. And he has no clue who owns mules. So that was a bust. My son was really disappointed. And since they weren't his, I went ahead and started snapping pictures of the mules and putting them on Facebook. We have the Northport missing animals or found animals, so I posted them there. I'm also on Nextdoor in our area, so I posted them on there too. Now, on the other side of our property is another gentleman who I know has donkeys. Or I could have mistaken for mules. I don't know. But I have his phone number, and I texted him, and he didn't answer. The only thing that I could figure out is either he was still asleep or he was in church. And there is a third property that abuts to our family property, and I thought, well, why not go ahead and jump in my truck and start looking around, seeing if someone's looking for their mules or just actively trying to find their owners. So I jumped down to my next neighbor's house. He's home, and it is not his mules. He does not have mules. He does not know anybody in this area who has mules. So I leave his house and I go to the third property that abuts to our property. And she has chickens and cats, but no mules. And she didn't know of anybody who had mules. She even called a neighbor who had a bunch of animals, and he has no idea who had mules. So that was a bust. So I head back home, and the donkeys are still up in the yard. The male has actually laid down in the grass where it was cool. It was actually getting pretty hot. So I just went inside and checked my Facebook, checked my Nextdoor, trying to see if anybody was looking for their mules, and so far nothing. Well, probably about an hour later, the mules decided to get up and start moving around, which was not good, because the next thing I know, I got people beating on my door letting me know that my mules were in the street. So I get outside, and there's a car in my driveway and two cars on the side of the road, and two young ladies helped me wrangle these donkeys back up into Eleanor's yard. And we actually got them in the backyard this time. And they were over by the well, so I ended up filling up a bucket and giving them some water. I imagine by this time they are thirsty. So amidst all the commotion, a gentleman did pull up into our driveway, and I cannot remember his name, but my mother-in-law knows him. And he takes a look at the two mules, and he's like, I know who owns them. And so he makes a phone call, and they're like, yes, those are our mules. We will be right there. So everybody left, which was great. I remember talking to one of the ladies that was there. She mentioned our beehive, and I told her that we got 25 gallons. I think that's what I told her, of honey, and she's like, wow, that's a lot. No, we got 25 pounds of honey. I am so sorry. I guess I was just so excited. I misspoke, so I do apologize. And after they left, the sheriff showed up because we did call the sheriff. And I talked to him for a little while. He actually came up by the well where I had not the horses, where I had the mules, and they were drinking. And one of the girls that was there, she left a leash, so he put the red leash on the male mule while I was holding on to the female mule. Now, the male mule was a little bit aggressive, and he had kicked at me, so I was trying to stay away from him. But the female mule, which they call a Molly, she let me scratch her head and pet her, and it was really cool. So it was a great experience. And then also I got to meet a lot of my neighbors, so that was pretty cool. But then the owners finally showed up, and it was awesome to find out that these mules were really about half a mile from the house. And I know if these guys ever show up again, I can hook them up and walk them back home. That's how close they are from my house. Alright guys, so that's going to be the end of my mule story, and this is the end of my chores for the day. I'm going to post a few videos and a few pictures that I got of the mules. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Please have a blessed and joyous day, and I will see you on my next video.
Oh, wait, doesn't Winslow have to go to work today?
No.
I wonder where he's going. He knows you're recording him.